Hello and welcome to A Cuppa with Karen.
This 920-page document would usher in the most conservative executive branch in modern American history, if enacted. It's called Project 2025. Its pages offer new administrations a blueprint for executing a right-wing agenda, from purging the government of thousands of civil servants to dismantling the Department of Education.
We do have to initiate the largest mass deportation project in the history of this country.
Former President Donald Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but Democrats aren't buying it.
Project 2025 would roll back our fundamental freedoms, undermine our democracy, and gut checks and balances.
Here's a closer look at the four main pillars of this radical plan and how they could transform the American government as we know it.
One of the things that's interesting about Project 2025 is the tone. You hear the term woke mentioned dozens of times, radical mentioned dozens of times. It's remarkably driven by culture war politics.
Project 2025 is designed as a government in waiting if Trump or any conservative president returns to office. It's the brainchild of the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank and lobbying group that has helped staff Republican administrations since the Reagan era.
We cover literally every public policy issue in Project 2025, from domestic policy to foreign policy.
Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation and one of the driving forces behind the project.
All Project 2025 is trying to do is to be a corrective to the liberal nonsense that has been so insidious inside the executive branch for the last half century.
The Heritage Foundation says Project 2025 is backed by more than 100 conservative organizations and a $22 million budget.
So I think the size, scale, and sophistication of Project 2025 is unprecedented.
The project has four main pillars: a policy plan, a personnel database, an online academy, and a playbook for the president's first 180 days in office.
We can be ready to hit the ground running on day one of the next administration.
The first pillar is a policy agenda that focuses on dismantling the so-called administrative state, or what some conservatives call the deep state.
Either the deep state destroys America, or we destroy the deep state.
For Project 2025, dismantling the administrative state means purging the civil workforce of tens of thousands of federal employees and replacing them with conservative, pre-vetted picks.
There is a concentration not just of power, but a concentration of radical leftist ideology in these employees. Hopefully, we will see over the next 10 to 20 years the elimination of entire cabinet departments.
The plan would dismantle the Department of Homeland Security, eliminate the Department of Education entirely, and transform the FBI into a political task force that is accountable to the president.
But the leadership of the FBI has been awful and rotten and not transparent for a long time. It is very important that Congress reestablish its purview over the FBI generally, its jurisdiction.
To give a sense of how radical this is, the FBI is an organization that has never been run by a Democrat. And so this is an organization that in its bones is a fairly conservative organization, and where now you have right-wing voices saying that it should be eliminated.
The playbook also outlines a plan to bring many federal agencies, like the Department of Justice, under more direct presidential control.
What Project 2025 articulates is the idea that the president should be the one directing the activities of the Department of Justice, even if that means that the president will not be investigated, or that the DOJ will be sent to attack the president's political enemies.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
The Heritage Foundation says it wants to ensure that what remains of this whittled-down federal bureaucracy is conservative, not just for the next president, but for a long time to come. Pillar 2.
That'll do with that. Let's check out a bit of this.
Here are 12 steps Republicans want to take when it comes to immigration. Stick with me to the end, because the last two are particularly egregious. Number 1. Finish the border wall. Trump would likely push to complete construction of the physical barrier along the U.S.-Mexico border. This would involve securing significant funding from Congress and potentially declaring national emergencies to reallocate funds. The project would face legal challenges, particularly regarding land acquisition through eminent domain. Environmental concerns and the impact on wildlife would also be contentious issues. Building the wall is something Trump promised to do in his first campaign, but of course, didn't get done. He also promised that Mexico would pay for it. Our southern neighbor hasn't paid a dime, and there's no indication it will do so in the future. All right, number 2. Reinstate Remain in Mexico. This policy would require asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their cases are processed in U.S. courts. Implementation would involve negotiations with the Mexican government and could strain diplomatic relations. Human rights organizations would likely challenge the policy, citing safety concerns for migrants in border towns. To be sure, the areas near the border are exceedingly dangerous. The logistics of managing court appearances for asylum seekers in Mexico would be complex and costly. This program was previously in place for a while, but it was blocked by the courts as illegal. It definitely made life hard on immigrants who were waiting in perilous conditions in Mexico, and there were reports that some people never got word that their hearing in the U.S. had been scheduled, so they missed it. Okay, next up on Republicans' immigration wish list per their Project 2025 playbook, number 3, expand expedited removal. Republicans want to speed up deportations for those who enter illegally or fail asylum screenings known as credible fear interviews. This could involve applying expedited removal throughout the entire U.S., not just within 100 miles of the border. It might also extend to individuals who have been in the country for up to 2 years, rather than just 14 days. These expedited removals have the goal of getting people out of the country as fast as possible, and don't afford people the right to fully explain their case in immigration court. The credible fear interview at the heart of this process is a brief talk with an asylum officer, usually by phone, right after a person comes to the United States, and usually no evidence is accepted. When I was an asylum officer with the government, I personally carried out many of thousands. I think it was in the thousands, and can tell you that it does not give asylum seekers a fair chance to state their case. The proposed expansion of this program thus increases the risk of wrongful deportations. With that, we're ready for number 4. Tighten asylum standards. Republicans aim to narrow the criteria for asylum, making it harder for migrants to qualify. This could include requiring more specific evidence of persecution or limiting grounds for asylum claims. The administration might try to exclude gang violence or domestic abuse as bases for asylum. Some of this would require actual changes to the law, but some can be done just with executive action. The executive branch of government, led by the president, has wide latitude in interpreting the immigration laws and can craft policies to advance a particular agenda. Trump did some of these last time he was in office. Many of the changes were blocked by courts or undone once Biden assumed office. In any event, the changes envisaged for Trump's next go-around could significantly reduce the number of successful asylum applications. By the way, if you want to maximize your chances for asylum success, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and bell notification so you don't miss the insights that I share on this channel. Okay, that brings us to number 5 on the list. End the so-called catch and release program. This would involve detaining more migrants rather than releasing them into the U.S. while awaiting hearings. You see, at present, the government aims to detain all asylum seekers unless and until they actually win their asylum case. Like, their asylum proceedings are meant to happen while they are still detained. But due to a lack of bed space and other resource constraints, the government simply can't hold all of them. So the government releases many of these people, some of them with ankle bracelets used to monitor them, and they go to their immigration court hearings in a non-detained setting. Trying to detain everyone for the entire duration of their asylum proceedings would require a massive expansion of detention facilities and massively increased funding for immigration and customs enforcement. The policy would face criticism over conditions in detention centers and the impact of prolonged detention on migrants' mental health. Legal challenges could arise based on due process concerns. And now, number 6. Increase Border Patrol staffing. Republicans advocate for hiring thousands more Border Patrol agents to try to stop illegal crossings at the southern border. This would require significant budget increases and could take years to implement due to rigorous training requirements. The expansion would involve not just frontline agents but also support staff and infrastructure. Critics might argue that technology investments could be much more cost-effective than personnel increases. All right, number 7. Deploy the military to the border. Trump might again use military personnel to support border operations. This could involve tasks like construction, surveillance, and logistical support. The move would likely face opposition from military leaders concerned about readiness and training impacts. Legal experts would question the legality of using the military for domestic law enforcement, which obviously isn't what the military is intended for. The potential for conflict between the U.S. military and state law enforcement authorities and National Guard units is also a concern. Next up, number 8. Put pressure on sanctuary cities. Expect renewed efforts under Republicans' plan to withhold federal funding from cities that don't cooperate with immigration enforcement, that is, sanctuary cities, as the political right has dubbed them. These are cities that refuse to have their law enforcement help federal immigration agents do their job, which of course goes beyond the scope of what local law enforcement is intended for. These include the largest U.S. cities, which are led by Democrat mayors: New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago. The administration might even seek to criminalize sanctuary policies at the federal level. This strategy would face legal challenges based on the 10th Amendment and principles of federalism. Okay, we're at number 9. Create agreements with Central American countries to try to get them to accept people who seek asylum in the United States. Republicans want to expand so-called safe third country agreements. The idea here is that we would just send to them people who come to the United States seeking asylum. This could involve pressuring more countries to accept asylum seekers, potentially offering aid or trade benefits as incentives. Critics would argue that these countries lack the resources to safely host asylum seekers. The policy could face challenges under international refugee law. The Trump administration struck agreements along these lines with Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, but the programs never really got off the ground. They were terminated by the Biden administration. Next up, number 10. Implement an extreme vetting program. This would involve more rigorous background checks for all immigrants and visitors. It could include enhanced social media screening, ideological tests, and increased information sharing with foreign governments. To be clear, the United States already does extensive security checks on asylum seekers and all others coming to the United States. I say this with experience, having personally been involved in this process both as an asylum officer with the Department of Homeland Security and as a visa officer with the Department of State. Privacy advocates would likely challenge the extent of data collection envisaged under any extreme vetting policy. The program could lead to longer processing times for immigration cases. All right, we're almost there. Number 11, reduce legal immigration. There will be a push to limit family-based immigration and so-called diversity visas. This could involve eliminating certain categories of family sponsorship or reducing annual quotas. A Trump administration might propose a points-based system favoring high-skilled immigrants. Such changes would face opposition from business groups reliant on immigrant labor and would mark a sharp departure from the primary goal of U.S. immigration policy for many decades: family reunification. To be sure, Trump was able to drastically reduce legal immigration during his term in office. Many fear it will be much worse if he's given another chance. And finally, number 12. End birthright citizenship. Some Republicans want to challenge the 14th Amendment's guarantee of citizenship to those born on U.S. soil. This would likely involve an executive order interpreting the 14th Amendment differently, followed by inevitable court challenges. The case would likely reach the Supreme Court, potentially leading to a landmark decision on citizenship rights. If successful, it would represent the most significant change to U.S. immigration law in history. Listen, it's crucial to understand that the threat posed to asylum seekers and to the immigration system in general is not just theoretical. With a more organized and experienced team behind him, Trump could succeed where he previously failed, turning his vision of a closed America into a reality. With this reality potentially ahead of us in the very near future, you need expert guidance in your asylum case. That's why we, at Political Asylum Lawyers, exist.
If you're ready to take the next step and get help with your asylum case, then please call my office today. Remember, we help people all over the country, so it doesn't matter where you live. Call us now to schedule an asylum strategy session so that we can help you secure your future in America through asylum. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and it's an honor to serve you in your asylum journey.
And now I know that. And that'll do. See you later. Bye.